everyone, and welcome to another Daily Objective. Today, the lineup is myself, Jonathan, and Mark. I don't think they still need introductions. I'll make a short introduction anyway. Jonathan, the businessman and the scholar, the editor of the book, you can see it behind. And also Mark, the Hollywood star, but also the student of objectivism and the intellectually curious. If Raka was here, he would make more catchy introduction, but that's as good as it gets from me, Nikos. So today the topic is education and capitalism. And actually, as we speak, on Twitter in the UK, both capitalism and communism are trending. And most people, of course, when they talk about capitalism, probably they think about this government that we now have, the conservative government. That's what people think capitalism is. They don't stop for a second to think that this is a government that is imposing all these regulations quite till recently, and they think they'll do it again. We are basically in something like a house arrest, and they are banning plastic straws, but that's what in people's mind is capitalism. And for communism, God knows what they have in mind. Anyway, how did the issue come back into, why is it such a big issue suddenly? Because the other day, the government and the relevant education bureau, so to speak, released the following guidelines to schools. Quote, schools should not under any circumstances use resources produced by organizations that take extreme political stances on matters. This is the case even if the material itself is not extreme, as the use of it could imply endorsement or support of the organization. And part of what constitutes these extreme views, whatever that means, is views that are considered anti-capitalist. So there was a lot of revolt by many teachers, and not only, who said this is ridiculous, this takes away important points of view, this takes away part of the British political history, which is its socialist movement and tradition, and this is wrong. So there's a lot to unpack here, but let's start with, and by the way, let me add one more thing. This comes only 1 week or 10 days later, since Trump, if you remember, released an executive order that says that we need to teach patriotic education in school. So what are your initial comments or something like that? We, the few defenders of capitalism, should we rejoice, or is there something wrong here? Mark.
Well, yeah, clearly there's something wrong. I mean, there's something wrong because capitalism is about essentially about liberty, right? Which means not only liberty and freedom with respect to material trade, but in the trade of ideas. And so people need to be exposed to all forms of ideas and debate those ideas as vigorously as possible to get at the truth. But to me, it just seems like a pragmatic response against one socialized system that has, prejudicially put forward an ideology for a very long time. Well, the other side's coming up with its rationalization for using force.
Well, Mark, I'll play devil's advocate for 1 second here. I mean, look, they don't want the schools to teach anti-capitalism. The same UK schools, as I understand it, just a couple of years ago, instituted some Ayn Rand curriculum as part of their politics. So, what's wrong with, again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but what's wrong with government in government schools instituting the so-called right ideas for kids?
Well, there are no quote unquote right ideas. The right idea is allowing people the liberty to decipher what is right and decide for themselves what's right. That's something that can't be programmed.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea of public schools, and this is sacrilege, Nikos, here in the States, but public schools is, I think we should make the point, is anathema really to what capitalism is about. The public schools is like the public park. Who owns it? Who controls it? No one owns it. It's just the loudest pressure group. It's just the loudest advocacy group. And the whole notion of government being involved in the realm of ideas. I mean, Nikos, as you talked about in the introduction, I mean, is capitalism, is being for capitalism extreme, or is being against capitalism anti-extreme? I mean, there's no clear definition of it. I think if we have to have schools should just teach history. Let's start with that more than propaganda. But ultimately, I think, Mark, as you're alluding to, parents should make these decisions about what schools should teach, and they should do it with their wallets, not based on pressuring government to fund the school or fund that school, but by patronizing their own schools in a private educational system. That's what the goal should be, not government schools teaching the so-called right ideas.
Well, but also notice. Sorry, go on, Mark.
I was going to say, do you mind if I play devil's advocate? It feels like people really think that socializing children is the ideal and the goal, and that when you have parents deciding curriculums, and you'll have a kind of atomizing effect on society. What do you say about that? Is that harmful? Is that bad? Or
well,
is that
I have to Google atomizing because I don't know exactly.
Well, it's like, every man is an island.
Let me take it a step further.
Are you taking?
What if the parents are white supremacists, or they teach kids that we come from Venus and that the Earth is flat?
It's always lifeboat situations with you two, and Nikos, you especially. We should only hope that Walmart or Apple open a university, right? That they open a public school. We should only hope that there's some type of innovation, there's some type of private initiative in the realm of education, as there is so oftentimes in the realm of private enterprise. But you don't have that with public schools. So what you have over and over again are these fights. The bathrooms, bathrooms going to be for gender neutral or not, the education, Holocaust or not, and all these battles that have to be ultimately enacted with force instead of with economic power, which is people's wallets and their own money.
So here's something else, though, to notice here. Notice how bad the language is. Extreme political stances. Well, we take extreme political. I'm happy to call myself an extremist. Like, was it Barry Goldwater who said, in the cause of freedom, being an extremist? Anyway, it's a great quote with a just
extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice.
Yes, exactly. That's the quote. So if someone is so short-sighted as to support this, despite the very good points that you brought up, the result of this is that when I go to mention, oh, by the way, there's also this philosopher called Ayn Rand, and extremist, you can't do that.
Right.
So this takes away all the interesting. I like having discussions about Marxism. I like having discussions in school about these big issues, Marxism versus capitalism, at its pure. I don't like the discussion that says, oh, let's find something in the middle. And let me tell you what, students don't like these discussions either. But there's another issue here, which calls for a solution. And I want your opinion, both of you, what the solution would be. Whatever we tell teachers to teach, here are the facts. In secondary schools, according to a research, 72% of teachers vote Labour and only 8% vote Tories. Now, there's zero guarantee that the 8% who vote Conservatives understand capitalism, but that's another discussion. If we judge from the party, maybe they are great people. Now, the equivalent in society is 30. So Labour has 32% of the vote in society, and yet 73% of teachers in secondary schools. The Tories, the Conservatives, the quote pro-market party, that's a joke, 43% in society, 8% in schools. So what can be done about this issue? So someone could say, okay, you capitalists, you think the market will solve everything. But even if the market will solve everything, we're going to be stuck with the same teachers who are going to believe the same quote extreme quote, many quotes. Okay, of course, not all 73% of them are extreme, but let's say 20% of these are Marxists, whatever. So what do we do about that? That the education is dominated by, let's say, the other side.
Well, don't you think that's because there's no market in education, really?
Right.
Don't you think that's
help me to understand this a bit more.
Well, certainly in the United States, primary and secondary schools are almost entirely public, and they've monopolized schooling. And the teachers union as well monopolizes who populates those institutions. And now you have the universities, which even the ones who are supposedly free, almost all receive some form of government aid. So that kind of institutionalization, I think, attracts a certain kind of person to the job, and it entrenches an establishment because they have aspects like tenure and stuff that are meant to apparently increase academic freedom, but they actually end up entrenching ideas, and so that those ideas become the establishment. I say open it up to the market, and the best teachers win. And I guarantee you, the ones who have been able to perpetuate their ideas by force and institutionalization will start to leave by necessity.
Yeah, I mean, and ultimately, how is it done, Nikos? It's very difficult. Maybe there needs to be a period of a voucher system of some sort, but I think you ultimately sell it, I think, about parents having the right to decide how their children should be educated. And as you said, if there's some crazy, terrible parents out there who want to name their kid Hitler and teach him, if there's awful people out there, ultimately, I believe that a rational society will dominate. But, stress the importance, I think, of keeping government out of the realm of ideas. And the role of government is a gun. It's there just as a mechanism of force, an important mechanism, but that a gun has no place in a classroom. And maybe stress some of the success stories out there. Laporte schools is one example. Lisa Van Dam's schools, Van Dam Academy. It's happening out there. To Mark's point, when you let a little bit of capitalism in the marketplace out there, and you know what? Those schools are expensive, but they're not completely, they're not completely out of reach. Especially there's scholarships available. So the market works if and when you let it. So maybe stress not the idea of like, here's what government schools should be teaching, but that parents have a right to send their children where they want, not this extraordinary burdensome cost that the public school demands. And ultimately the results are much better than anyone could ever imagine.
And I think you have to note that the reason those private schools are expensive and give the everyday average person out there the impression that private schooling is for elitists is because the private schools are competing with the monopoly of the public schools.
Exactly.
So
right.
How much cheaper would it be if the market were open?
Now, Jonathan mentioned Van Damme School. So the person behind them is Lisa Van Damme. And guess who is our guest in today's Ayn Rand meetup in 45 minutes? Lisa Van Damme and another brilliant intellectual and educator, Joanna Williams. So here's a quick pitch. 40 minutes after the end of the Daily Objective, go to check the social media of Ayn Rand Center UK and follow that discussion. It's going to be very interesting and something like a natural follow-up from the things we discuss here.
Yeah, but I'll just say, I don't have kids, but if I did, I would make sure that I had enough money saved up before I had them to be able to send them to a private school. I think there's this idea now, just have kids and don't worry, the government will educate them. I think as a parent, you're going to say, no, that's my responsibility, especially now, given the fact that, what they teach in the public schools is terrible. At least it's terrible here in the States. So, education has to be the responsibility of the parents, and it comes at a cost. But Mark, to your point, it would be a much smaller cost of government would just get out of the way.
It's very interesting that see how everything else in society is progressing. Technology, in terms of the computers, so everything is getting better. In some ways, education is stuck to this Prussian or whatever model it's been built on for like 150 years. But here's what I see behind all this. I see that the conservatives in both sides of the Atlantic, they've smelled blood in the culture wars. So they're completely devoid of ideas. They couldn't know capitalism if it hit them on the head, but they're like, we can stick it to the other side. So here you have the conservative government that has imposed the lockdowns, one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, that has banned non-electric cars from 2035 onwards, that is constantly intervening with regulations. It's a government that the police can knock on your door if you use the wrong language on Twitter. And this government wants to teach us about capitalism. That's ridiculous. So we need to see what is behind it. And what is behind it is the culture wars. And the essence of the culture wars is, I'm going to stick it to the other side where it hurts. But here's another thing they haven't thought about. What if the next government is maybe not Jeremy Corbyn, who people thought, oh, he's a Marxist, whatever. Let's say it's a more mainstream socialist. But that guy says, you know who is an extremist and a radical? Milton Friedman, Friedrich Hayek. Oh, don't even get me started with Ayn Rand. So let's ban them. And the same thing is what they don't understand in the States. If in 4-year time you find yourself with OAC, OAC is the good program, with AOC as your president, and she wants to impose not a patriotic education, but let's say whatever, a critical race theory education, then the same people who are now cheering, oh yeah, President Trump, you know, he's imposing the good ideas in education. They don't understand that the state power is a weapon that can fall to the hands of the other side. So I'm not even expecting from them to understand the issue on the level of principles and abstractions that you both described, but even on the quote practical level, they're completely unable to understand what could be the consequences of that. So parting words from both of you on the issue.
Well, I wanted to say, since it seems that both sides come from an essentially similar outlook with respect to government, that the government force is justified to get behind something. So the right says it's to get behind the corporate power and business. The left says it's to get behind the people, and we steal resources and manipulate the law according to those particular tribes. So since that seems to be the argument that even people in the street are using when they talk about capitalism, oh, it's just the government for the corporations. Let's redefine that for people. So Jonathan, if you were to depart from this right-wing vision of the government using its powers liberally to make way for corporatism and the business world and the rich, how would you depart ways and say, no, capitalism isn't that, it's this?
I mean, I think, as Mark, you alluded to me, capitalism is a system of limited and restricted government where people's choices, especially about something as ultimately important as education. And even though America wasn't founded as a perfect capitalist country, if you look at our founding documents, there's nothing about public education in there. I think the founders very wisely didn't have any right to public education. It reminds me of that line. I don't know if you ever did Evita as a younger actor or as a musical actor, but that line in Evita where they say, get them while they're young, Evita, get them while they're young. Children are so impressionable. And the idea that government, that gun, as I said, would be the tool and in charge of educating young people, as you think about it from a principled perspective, it's so anathema to really what capitalism and freedom is ultimately all about. So I think, as Nikos, you were alluding to, for me, make that principled stand, say government has no role in educating young people, no matter whether it's Trump, who ironically wants to fund his education program by shaking down Oracle and Walmart through the sale of TikTok. So he's gonna finance the education on capitalism through unfairly shaking down private companies. Just get government out of the realm of ideas. That's what I think the capitalist perspective is, and certainly what I think, if I can say, the objectivist perspective would be in this case.
And actually, to understand what a free society would look like, just look behind you that book, a new textbook of Americanism, the politics of Ayn Rand. Yeah, I've got it in my library. I should have it here and wave it. Yeah.
Thank you, Nikos, and thank you, Mark.
So thanks.
I've got mine somewhere back there too. I should drag it out.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Also, Mark, can we ask you to show us your T-shirt?
Yes, this is my candidate for 2020.
That candidate has my vote. Right. So thanks so much to both of you. Many thanks to our audience. Now the evening, or depending on when you are, the afternoon, is not over. It's just beginning, because in 35 minutes, the Ayn Rand Center UK is hosting a discussion on education with Lisa Van Dam and Joanna Williams. I'm chairing it, so I'll see you soon. Otherwise, many thanks from me and my co-host. See you soon.